Okay, you are recording and you are live on YouTube. You are set to go. Mike, I'll go ahead and I'll assign you the host privileges.
Okay.
And then either of you can just Slack me if there's any pieces.
Perfect.
Thanks, Dave.
So Cassie, how have things been for you this spring?
Really busy, I'm sure, like with everyone. It's just been a wild time, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But events like this are really motivating and inspiring. So there are rays of brightness in this weird time.
Yeah. Well, it was awesome. The education commissioner gave a shout out.
I saw that.
It was on Flipgrid. That was so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just gonna...
Really happy for Sean too. He's put in a lot of effort and kind of fostered the idea. And
I'm gonna check with Dave. I'm not seeing you live yet on YouTube.
Oh, okay. Just a note for participants, we will be having some different participation activities going on. I've got a Mentimeter set up to kind of poll the audience. We'll use the chat either on Zoom or YouTube. And then also we're going to try and do a breakout. And Cassie, did you get the instructions for that? We're good to go on that. So we'll try a breakout as a way for you guys to have some conversation together around the topic. And hopefully we'll have enough time to get through. I appreciate everybody being here. You can see the tiny URL link on the bottom of the first slide here, so that if you want to pull that up, there's lots of links to resources within that document. So.
Mike, I'm going to keep posting some things in the chat just because people just joined, they can't see the old chat. So, okay.
And I'll be right back. My son's home from college, and his ukulele playing might have been good background music. I don't know, but
it would have been great.
Hello.
Hi, welcome to the session. We'll get started shortly. If you could mute your mic, that would be awesome.
This is Linda. I'm here too. So.
Wonderful. Thanks.
It's 101, Mike. Oh, your mic. Oh.
Oh.
All right.
There we go. Welcome, everyone. My name is Michael Walker. I'm Secondary Digital Learning Specialist in Edina, Minnesota, and I want to welcome you to Learning to Pivot. How can we harness some of the positive aspects of distance learning for the future of education? On the slide here, you can see our tiny URL so that you can access these slides. There's lots of interactive aspects of it. As we go through today, there's going to be some opportunities for you to share some with some polling that I'm going to do using Mentimeter, and we're even going to include a breakout where you're going to get a chance to talk with other participants about some of these topics that we'll be talking about today. So a little bit about me. I have been an educator since 1984, so you do the math. That picture there is from around 1985 there of me in a classroom in Lakeville. I taught there for a few years before coming to Edina. And there's my contact information in that. I live in Minneapolis with my wife and 2 kids who are home doing distance learning themselves here at school. And I made myself a grilled ham and cheese sandwich for lunch. And so now it's an opportunity for you to share who you are. And you can go into the Zoom chat, or you can go into the chat on YouTube and take a moment to share your name and title and what you had for lunch, if you've had a chance to eat lunch at school. Seeing lots of good stuff here. Very nice. Sorry for those of you who haven't had lunch. I really appreciate you being here, but it's nice to see people from all around the state and seeing some familiar faces as we go through. So as we are in our session today, a couple norm reminders. If you have not muted your microphone, please do so. I'm hearing some dinging in the background. I don't know if that's just natural as part of me being a moderator in this, but we're going to be switching some tabs. Again, the short URL to access the slide deck is right there. And then I will be having you go to menti.com, and I'll give you the code in a minute to answer some questions that I have for you, and we'll kind of poll the audience as we're going through this. Use the chat if you have any questions throughout this, And remember, you can always go back to the resources later. I've tried to link as much as possible, any images there that will link to the actual resource or where I got it, to give credit to those people, and also if you wanted to utilize those resources. And then after this is done, Cassie's going to share a Google Meet that if you want to extend the conversation, you're welcome to do that. But if you also would like to check out the Flipgrid that is associated with this session, you can go to that Flipgrid and leave some comments and really continue to extend the conversation, because as we're talking about the future of education, this isn't something that we're going to solve today. It's something that's going to be a continuing conversation as we go through the process. So I'd like to start by talking a little bit about my context. As I said, I am a digital learning specialist in Edina, Minnesota. And in Edina, we've adopted this learning framework, which is tied to personalized learning. And it really talks about core components of learner profiles, customized learning paths, proficiency-based progress. But over here, you'll see we have digital age learning tools and anytime, anywhere learning, and different learner choice, culturally and linguistically responsive, inquiry. All of those things are a part of this. And all of it is tied together with a lens of equity. When we talk about digital age learning, we're talking about giving students choice and opportunities in how they explore content, how they engage in that content, and how they express their learning. That's kind of the language that we use around it. A little bit about our infrastructure. As a district, we have Seesaw as our LMS in grades K through 2, and that at the start of distance learning, we're now E through 2 with Seesaw. At grades 3 through 5, we had adopted Schoology, but there wasn't that much penetration. But that's our LMS now for 3 through 5, and then 6 through 12 is Schoology, and we have one-to-one district provided and a blend with BYOD for our secondary students. All the third through fifth grade students had a Chromebook card in their classroom when this all started. So on March 15th, the governor and the Department of Health announced that schools were going to close. And fortunately for us, we had a professional development day on the 13th. And so I'll talk in a little bit about the training that I went through, or that we went through on that date. But as you think about March 15th for you and your district, what did your infrastructure look like? If you go to menti.com and enter code 668099, you can go on and answer this question. And I've kind of broken it out by no devices, no learning management system, all the way through full one-to-one with a common learning management system for everyone. So if you would take a moment to fill that survey out, I will give you a second, and then you can check it out. We'll see what we come up with here. And I'm going to start showing the results. You can see it populating. So we can see that many had elementary devices at school with a common LMS, but we also have many that were full one-to-one with a common LMS. So it's interesting here. And of course, we do have some with no devices and no common LMS, which is kind of expected. So we kind of have a wide range when you look at the different people in this session and what they were dealing with when we hit March 15th. So for my training on March 13th, we had the benefit of having talked about snow days and e-learning days for if we had a weather event prior at the beginning of the school year during our workshop week. And so I really led with kind of the advice of keeping it simple and successful, that trying to go full bells and whistles on day one or even week one or even first 2 weeks was going to be fraught with trouble, and that you needed to keep it simple and successful. Along with that, Sean Beaverson, who big shout out to Sean for conceiving of the Minnesota Distance Learning Summit. So if you like this learning opportunity today, please give a shout out to Sean Beaverson. It's been amazing. But he kind of talked about routines and relationships, that continue to have the routines and the relationships, that social emotional learning piece is really important. And he stressed that with elementary staff as well. We also talked about distance learning vocabulary, about asynchronous learning happening at different times and synchronous learning happening together. And from the research that we learned about as we started digging into this, that online schools and schools that had started distance learning were saying that the asynchronous was great for the deep learning, but the synchronous was the real focus should be about maintaining relationships. And you'll see that play out in most of the research that you look at. I know it was talked about at some of our earlier sessions today. So we developed a distance learning plan, and we utilized resources from a school in Japan, as well as schools in California and other places, schools around the metro area who contributed ideas to develop our plan. And we set it up by each grade level. We had initially packets for kids at the elementary level, and because we had a full learning management system, Schoology is our learning management system at our secondary schools, and all of our secondary teachers had a course in there, and all students had a device, and we were pretty confident because of hotspots and other things that we'd been able to provide all of our families, that all of our families had access, that we rolled out our plan. And again, we stood on the shoulders of a lot of people to build this together, and there was a ton of collaboration that went into this, and I'm sure it was in your district as well. Well, the first week of distance learning, this article appeared in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and it was getting shared all over social media that this really isn't learning. And people started coming up with all kinds of different names for it. It was emergency learning, emergency online, COVID schooling, crisis learning, all of these different ways of describing what was happening. And a little bit after that, Scott McLeod, Dr. Scott McLeod, who used to be at the University of Minnesota, came up with this chart, kind of the response phases for what this process is all about and our school's responses to it. That, you know, the basic access of phase one, just making sure kids have food and maybe devices and hotspots, all the way through being ready to look ahead. And you can kind of see the different levels there. And I'm going to take a moment to let you look through this, because in a minute, I'm going to ask you where you think your district is at in the phases at this point in time. So if you go to menti.com, again, you can go to that code and we can see what phase is your district currently in, and take a moment to share your thoughts on that. And I know this is a hard question, because in some cases, you personally may be at a different level that your district's at. Your school or grade level may be at a different place than your district is at. But think about this from a district standpoint or from an all school standpoint, depending on your teaching environment. All right, let's take a look here. So it looks like over half are kind of at that subsistence learning level, and we've got a few at level 3 and a few who are ready to start looking ahead. We'll wait just a second for the last few to enter in their results. So as we go back to our image, you know, many of you are in this phase here, obviously. And we've got a few in here. And it seems to be even going up as I got done. So if we think back, you know, we've got lower level knowledge, paper and packets, and obviously there was tons of rapid teacher training, learning technologies and online platforms. And I think that's something that as we think about this experience is maybe at the time it's pretty stressful, but it may be one of the positive things that comes out of this, right? So after week 1, I started seeing in our learning management system a lot of courses that looked something like this, where it was kind of the crisis learning type mode of people naming things based on the date, based on distance or e-learning day. Not really, it might have had curriculum tied to it, but it wasn't necessarily what I would consider like an online course where you would actually have the units and you'd just be teaching out of your unit. There were some specific things that were different. And some of this was tied to our decision at the secondary level to have what are called attendance-based assignments. So there might be an attendance-based assignment that kids complete that is separate from the other learning that might be going on that would be part of a regular class. And so trying to blend those two. And because of that, I kind of was wondering whether we needed to be pivoting away from calling it distance or e-learning and thinking about just calling it learning. So I tweeted this out and got a few responses. A lot of people liked the idea, but there were several responses, and one of them came from Dr. Brian Sanders out in California, who had started a chat called Learning to Pivot on Tuesdays. And so I took him up on the offer and started having conversations. And every Tuesday since, we've been having these conversations. And Cassie, if you can help me out here and unmute Brian, who has graciously joined us as a way to kind of share his ideas around why he started it, along with Dr. Verena Roberts, and kind of share some of the thinking and the work that you've been doing. Brian? Cassie, were you able to find him?
Working on it.
Okay.
Is there a last name?
Sanders. Oh, here he is.
Hey, sorry, can I have 30 seconds?
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, before I speak, sorry.
You're on. Oh, got it. One of the things that happen sometimes. He's out in California, probably trying to do work as well right now. But one of the things that's been really interesting until Brian gets on around these conversations is it's brought in people from around the world to be talking. So we've got individual Jane, who's in Great Britain, Dr. Gary Stager, John Carippo, and others have been joining these conversations and kind of talking about what we can learn from this process and how can we make education better through this process. And a lot of it involves some constructivist ideas and thinking, but hopefully Brian will be able to join us momentarily and share some of that.
Just a reminder, if you're having any trouble with your connection, you can always go over to the YouTube channel, and I'll post that link here right now in the chat. And if you still want to have access to Mike's presentation, I'll also post that link in the chat.
Yeah.
Mike, there's been a lot of good conversations on the chats. And
yeah, I was just going through the chat just now.
Yeah, no direct questions for you right now, but lots of people are chiming in.
Right. It's interesting to hear students preferring some packets, paper packets to the other things. So yeah, peer collaboration, better to work on that. Thinking about some ways that might happen. Brian, you there?
Okay, here I am. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
So, hi, this is great. Thanks so much for the invitation. Yeah, this new world we're in is bizarre and so exciting. You know, that it's awful to say that. You know, that there's this strange opportunity to do things that many of us have been working on for decades, and that the literature has been talking about for decades. And so, you know, this idea of the pivot is not new. It's just that, you know, the concept of learning to pivot actually might be new, in that we probably don't build in enough time to learn how to pivot, even though we know that we ought to do it. And so what happened for me is, you know, I've been teaching, this is, I believe, year 25 or so. And, you know, I from the very beginning, I was a constructivist before I even knew that word. You know, I started as a 23-year-old and just, you know, full of ideas and excited to be in the room with kids working on big things. And so as I started, you know, doing more research and reading, and then slowly, eventually, became Dr. Brian Sanders, just because it was, I can't stop, you know, reading and writing, and I just love it so much. I figured out that, well, okay, so there's just something we haven't quite done. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of me trying out this new version of myself as an educator, we were all sent home. And so it was this fascinating thing happened where, and you might have seen it too, where a lot of the things that we were doing, the strategies as teachers that we felt like, okay, you know, don't do this, were actually, from what I was observing, happening more frequently, just because we're scrambling and trying to figure out what to do. You know, so many digital worksheets, so many obvious prompts, so many, you know, answers at the back of the book kinds of approaches to learning experiences. And they really weren't learning experiences, really. They're more like these teaching strategies rather than learning experiences. And so I sort of muddled with it, and then I wrote a piece about a month or so ago, put it on my website, and just got it out there just to get people's opinions. And, you know, I didn't get that many because I'm not famous or anything, but I did find a couple of people on Twitter that shared similar attitudes and observed similar things. And so we just, you know, created a small discussion group that's slowly becoming a medium-sized discussion group. And that's where I met Michael and many other people that you know, just are trying to figure it out. And we don't have the answers, but we know that if we keep talking to each other every week and you know, really infuse our talks with some homework, with some readings to ground our ideas, either in some theories that we know well, but maybe have sort of left behind in our research, and want to, you know, put to the front of our brain, or just reading some provocative pieces to get our thinking going, because we're not going to go back to regular school ever again, even if we were to go back to regular school. You know what I'm saying? Like, even if we have a vaccine and we never have to think about this again with coronavirus 19, like we as educators know that this experience has lifted back so many different curtains on what's been going on that has been ignored, and it's also revealed so many things about how the system itself, internationally, is it's more than just your kids go to school, right? And so everyone's now, they knew that, but now they're being faced with all of these realities that we've been sort of looking at, like, oh, that's really inconvenient that we don't fund schools enough, or, oh, that's really inconvenient that kids don't have this, or that teachers are constrained. But you know what, we can't really deal with that. We're now in a place where we're forced to deal with it in a whole new way. And so it's for certain that things are going to change in ways that we need to prepare for, and we do need to learn how to pivot. And it's not built into the teacher prep programs. It's not built in to the professional development at schools and districts for the most part. I mean, like, I'm sure there are places that it is. So, that this has just been an exciting new chapter of my career, just to meet new people from all around the world and talk about great ideas and really try to push each other to figure out, what can we do that's best for student learning, and really focus on that.
Yep. Well, that's awesome, Brian. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us and share some of that. I'll continue as we're going through here today, sharing some of the resources that we have been talking about on our Tuesdays. And I invite everyone who's interested to continue the conversation through the Learning to Pivot conversations that are happening. And
you're all invited. Every one of you can come. It's an open invitation.
For sure. All right. Thanks, Brian. So in those conversations, and as we started having these conversations, I saw this tweet from Daniel Hodge, who's a 5th grade teacher, I believe, that the students listed 20 things they actually like about remote learning, and turned it into a list of changes that he needs to make in his classroom next year. And it kind of ties in with what Brian was just saying about some of the aspects of distance learning that where we're seeing students thrive, maybe. So what I'd like you to do right now is we're going to have a breakout where you have an opportunity to share some of the positive things your kids have been talking about. And along with that, what aspects of distance learning do you think should be incorporated in our future instructional practice? And so Cassie is going to set up the breakout, and we'll break out. And then in the YouTube chat, if you're on YouTube, you can use the chat there to have it, since you won't be in the breakout. But then as you're having that breakout conversation, I'd like you to go back to Menti, and the next question is, what aspects of distance learning do you think should become part of our instructional practice? And I'll have you take a moment to share some of that. So we're going to break out for probably 7 minutes, and then we'll come back together. So let's give it a try.
Mike, I don't think I have access to do breakout rooms. I think you might have that access. Do you see the dots on the bottom? There it is.
Yep.
Sweet.
All right, here we go. This is going to be, oops, I'm going to go a little bit higher. We're going to split up into 30 breakout rooms, 5 to 6 people per room. And here we go. You should have access to the breakout now.
Do you know if it's possible to get put back into a breakout room?
I think.
Because I had one other person in there and then they left.
Oh,
I got kicked off when I tried to go.
okay. So I see 2 people are unassigned.
I was assigned to room 8, but I tried to get in there.
I was just in there by myself.
Okay, Aaron, I'm going to try one here. And oops. I think I just put her in the waiting room instead.
Breakout room 1, okay.
Yeah, give that a try. Sorry, Aaron.
I have my coworkers laughing at me.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay.
Aaron, there's a good conversation happening on the YouTube chat. I can put that link here in the thing if you just wanted to even read through those, given the technical problems.
Awesome.
Sorry about that, Aaron.
Hey, not a problem. I'm presenting on Monday, so this is good to know, like things like this happen.
Right. And I see there's a few people listed not joined, but it seems like most are. We've got about 16 responses on the Menti, so I'm going to bring everybody back here pretty quick so we can get through everything at the end. All right, I'm going to close all rooms now. Oh. Apparently when you close a session, it does a full minute countdown. I did not know that.
But it gives people the chance to return to the main screen. It gives a little button that they can push immediately. So that's how I got here so quickly.
Good. Okay.
Yep.
Well, hopefully everyone will see that and continue on. I'm going to show the results here.
Mike, if you're interested at all, I could summarize a bit of the conversation on YouTube at some point.
I think that would be great. Yeah, yeah.
You just let me know when you want me to do that.
Mm-hmm. All right, everyone. As you can see on my screen here, we're getting more and more results. And what's really interesting to me around this, I knew that flexibility was going to come up, but communication and student choice, student voice are high on there. And it really ties to some of what we've been talking about around personalized learning and other things like that, these are the components that are really bubbling up to the surface. So I love this as it's coming up, and I will definitely be sharing this out on Twitter, what people came up with, because this is just wonderful stuff. And it's interesting to see asynchronous activities coming up too, that one of the things that many of our staff are saying is that these kids who never say anything in class are like, wow, I'm really finding out what they know and what they're thinking now because of this asynchronous opportunities that they're having to share. So some of the feedback that I got in the process as we were moving forward, this is a blog post from John Moore, who's one of our 6th grade language arts teachers in Edina. And he was talking about some of the positive aspects that he was seeing that, and he started positing about how can we make the shift. And the other thing that I saw from several people were messages like this: I have learned so much in these last few weeks, and it's made me a better teacher. And that, it feels really good in my role to see something like that, but realizing that's happening and people are recognizing that, I think, is one of the things that really drew me to thinking about this topic more. As I said, which kids are being successful? Some are struggling, and we definitely are seeing that, but many are thriving in this because they like many of the things that you mentioned: flexibility, having some autonomy, and having their voice heard in the process. So this whole idea of learning to pivot and changing our practice. And I see some, I had to throw in the animated GIF from Ross here. Somebody asked the question the other day, it was Jeremy Williams, who's a teacher overseas, what are we going to do in schools if this thing isn't over by August? And my response, which maybe seems a little bit snarky, is, well, it's the same thing we're doing now, but we're going to be doing it better. We're hopefully going to iterate and continue to work on improving our practice through this. In our Learning to Pivot conversations, this article came up early on a couple of weeks ago. Someone shared, and I can't remember exactly who shared it, but it's from Thomas Carroll. It's from the year 2000. If we didn't have the schools we have today, would we create the schools we have today? And that was one of, Brian was talking about some of the homework that we've had. And this article was part of that homework. And again, on the slide deck, which I'll share the tiny URL again at the end, or Cassie has it in the chat. The article is linked to this slide, but it really talks about, would we build schools with rows and other things the way we have them now if we didn't have school? Some other things that I've been reading and books that have come up in our discussion on the Learning to Pivot, the Lifelong Kindergarten, Mitch Resnick's book, is one that I know I'm going to be getting. I haven't read that one, But Katie Martin's Learner-Centered Innovation, George Couros' Innovator's Mindset, Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain by Zaretta Hammond is one that all of our instructional coaches have been reading this year. Has some great things, and I'll share some of that at the end here. Launch by John Spencer and AJ Giuliani about design thinking. Gary Stager's Invent to Learn, and Sylvia Tolosano and Jeannie Hale's Guide to Documenting Learning are all ones that I think are worth taking a look at. But in our conversation last Tuesday, Gary Stager made this point. All the problems with distance learning that people are having can be solved if we just find the cure for amnesia, because we have been doing digital age learning. We've been doing one-to-one, and Gary's been doing it since about 1989. And so Gary's got these principles, and as Brian mentioned, they're tied to some constructivist principles. Gary was a disciple of Seymour Papert, that asynchronous is better than synchronous. Audio can be more important than video. Text is more deliberative, reflective, and democratic. You shouldn't be lecturing in your classroom like I'm doing right now. And definitely don't do it online. Thank you. But if you require more than a minute or two before inviting students to do something, there's a problem. But chatting is learning. And hopefully when you guys were having your breakout conversations, you were learning from each other in that process. And the other thing that Gary talks about that I think is really important is less us, more them. Giving the student more of the student voice than the teacher voice. So as I've been going through this process, there's been some lesson designs that have been bubbling up that I think are worth considering as we think about this pivot. John Carippo shared this video, and because of time constraints, I'm not going to show it right now, about edu protocols that are really designed to provide opportunities for students to engage. It's really tied to our digital age learning, engaging in some content, exploring the content, engaging in that content, and then expressing their learning. And the edu protocol process is very similar to that. Sylvia Tolosano has some good things. Horticultural documentation, giving students choice, personalized learning, personal learning network. Those are a lot of the things that bubbled up in your answers earlier. A couple of weeks ago, Caitlin Tucker took Roger Bybee's 5 E's instructional model and looked at not only the lesson design elements and what does it look like, but what tools can be used to support that in a distance learning or online environment. And about 2 days after I saw this, and I was like, wow, this is the greatest thing, some of our instructional coaches said, well, remember, in this book, Hammond talks about these 4 components, and by golly, they're really closely tied to what Tucker was talking about and what Bybee is talking about in those 5 E's. And I said, well, can we marry them? And so we've done that, where the engaging piece is really where you're igniting, and it's brainstorming and it's inquiry, explaining, you're doing some chunking of the material, you're exploring, you're doing some chewing, you're elaborating on that. So there's more chewing. And then finally, you're evaluating, reviewing, and expressing the learning at the end. And on this document, I've also linked to different tools that we have set up for that process. Well, the other day, as we think about learning as being the be-all and end-all, Dean Sharesky, who is a wonderful educator from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, who I've been following since I first got on Twitter, posed this question. And he notes that school is really about community and connection and not just being. When you talk to kids about what they miss, and I've had a chance to do that, they miss seeing their teachers, that face-to-face interaction. And it's really important for us to remember that we have to also provide opportunities to just be with one another and to be together. And so using those synchronous sessions, not just for instruction, but really just to be and build community. Ben Friesen had some great examples of that in the first session this morning, is really important. And then my wife, who's a parent educator, shared with me just today this how to support teachers' emotional needs right now, because that has been a big issue too. But here's what's really interesting about that. The top 5 emotions were frustrated, overwhelmed, stressed, tired, and happy. And that was on the 2017 survey, before COVID-19, before distance learning. And so when you think about that, you know, people are saying, hey, take care of yourself. But then they're saying, here's these 8 meetings you're supposed to be at the same time and emails to answer and all of that. And we need to think about that. And so this article is talking about, as we think about the future and pivoting to improved learning, we should be building an emotional intelligence charter that asks, how do we want to feel as a faculty and staff post-COVID? What do we need to do for everyone to feel this way? And so those are some important questions to ask too, not just about the learning, but just about the social emotional aspect of everything. So if you could take a moment to go to Menti again, and the last question that I have for you is, what are your top 3 takeaways from this conversation? Take a moment to post that on the Menti. What are the 3 things you're taking away from this? I'd love to get that as feedback. So if you can go to menti.com and share your thoughts on that. And then I do want to invite you to continue the conversation with our Learning to Pivot sessions on Tuesdays, and I have a link to that, the YouTube channel on this slide, along with following the MNDL Summit. We will be having a post conversation on Google Meet momentarily, and I'll jump into that. I think Cassie is going to be posting that for you to fill out. There is the form is linked now in the chat for the CEUs, and I believe Cassie's posting that as well on the YouTube channel, so you can get CEUs for this. And then share your thoughts and ideas in the Flipgrid discussion as well. And here you can see some of your comments. Well, these are great takeaways. I really appreciate people being here. And with that, we thank you for coming.
Hi, everybody. I'm putting some more links in the chat a couple times. First, thanks to Mike for an awesome presentation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If anyone's interested in continuing the conversation, you can move to the lounge, which is in Google Meets. And I'll post that one more time here in the chat window. Also, for those of you looking for CEUs, there's a very short form you need to fill out. And that link is also here in the chat. And then finally, if you want to head over to Flipgrid and post a message or participate asynchronously in conversations, there's all kinds of things for you to do there. That's it, I think. Mike.
I had a quick question that came up.
Yeah.
Are we supposed to fill out the CEUs one at a time, like one after every session, or should we wait till the end of Friday and Monday and then check the boxes for all the CEUs that we've attended? Which is the best way?
You can, I know that there's a way that you can just check all the ones that you've completed and then just submit it that way. I think that personally, that's what I would do. I think that would work the best.
It doesn't matter either way. Either way, you're going to get it. It's just however you want to.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, that
Thanks
was
so
a
much,
wonderful
everyone.
session.
Brian, thank you so much. That was awesome.
Look forward to talking more with all of you later.
Yeah.
Tuesday. Every Tuesday.
Nice job, Mike.
Thanks, Cassie. You did a great job. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're so welcome. It was fun. You were in the hot seat. Well done.
Thanks.
I'm going to send you a couple more comments from the YouTube chat on Twitter that you can use.
Yep. And I'm going to be jumping over now to the Google Meet so that I can continue the conversation if you'd like to. We'll see ya.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close out this Zoom room, and everyone is welcome to join us back right at 2 o'clock. Thank you so much.